We had a 1.5-day session with the staff team around how we put the strategy into action. And we actually had a half-hour session on how to say no.
Hi, I'm Belden Mankus. Welcome to the Purposeful Strategist, the podcast that shifts the conversation about purpose and strategy from what organizations should do to what business leaders actually are doing and what they've learned along the way. My guest today is Ben Peachey, Chief Executive of the Chartered Institute of Ergonomics and Human Factors, a role he has held since September 2022. Ben is a strategy and stakeholder engagement specialist and former BBC journalist with more than 15 years senior management experience in member organizations. He recently unveiled a refreshed strategy for the Institute, so this seemed like a good time to interview him about how purpose and strategy work together in his organization. Ben, welcome to the Purposeful Strategist podcast.
Thanks so much, Belden. Really looking forward to it and delighted to be invited.
Great. Let's start by defining our terms. How do you understand purpose in the context of an organization?
Sure. I've been on a bit of a journey with this. What I like about purpose and ambition versus vision and mission is that purpose really talks to why do we exist? So do you have a purpose statement that articulates why you exist as an organization? We are a chartered institute with a royal charter and we're a charity. And so we have charitable purposes. So actually for us as an organization, writing our purpose statement, it's almost a journalistic exercise. We had our purposes already. It was like, how do we edit those down into a single statement?
Your website says that your purpose is to help human factors professionals make life better and safer for people in society. It sounds like when you joined, that was there already, or was there a journalistic exercise after you joined?
Yeah, so before that, we had a vision statement for the organizations. If you go and read our Royal Charter, we're set up to do two things, really. One is to help human factors professionals on their journey, and then secondly, to have an impact in society. So it was just an exercise to engage our internal stakeholders and say, it's a good idea to articulate why we exist as a purpose statement. Then agree that the approach was to work from our charitable purposes, then to come up with this statement. We're a chartered body. We have around 2,000 members and around 500 of those are chartered. So only 25% of our members is what we would call recognized human factors professionals. The other 75% are a range of people. There could be students who are on their journey to that. There could be professionals who are seeking to become chartered. But also we have a lot of what we call champions of human factors in our membership. These are senior people in different organizations who believe in the role of human factors, support human factors professionals, but have no desire or capacity or intention to become a professional. And we did have a conversation going, does this purpose statement almost alienate that group? And my view is, no, it doesn't, but we need to work hard in our communication to demonstrate it, because helping human factors professionals have the impact that they want to have or need to have, they need the champions to help enable them to do it.
I wonder if I could go back and cover a couple
of course.
One is, what's human factors? I think I understand ergonomics, but in my mind, it's mostly about chairs, and I'm sure it's a lot more than that. So what's that all about? And then second, particularly for people who aren't from the UK, or maybe even people who are, what's this Royal Charter thing all about? What does it do? Why does it make a difference?
Two very good questions. When we talk about ergonomics and human factors, what we say to people is those are two terms that mean the same thing, but some people are more comfortable with ergonomics, some with human factors. We have quite a broad definition. It's basically about anything that helps improve systems, tools, products and processes from a human perspective. Our members tend to come from two broad backgrounds. There's the psychological side of human performance, and then there's the physiological side. So I have a member who works for Amazon, who's one of our trustees. One of his roles is helping reduce MSD, so musculoskeletal disorders. in their workers in warehouses. Part of that is looking at managing shifts, so people have enough breaks in their time. It's about making sure they don't lift too heavy weights. It's looking at the way they do movement. So that's one side of it. I've got members who work in the design of submarines. So you've got people who spend their lives under the sea. So how do you make that environment as good as possible? So again, part of it is about good design of products and things, even like how screens work. Ergonomics as a scientific discipline actually came from defense post World War II. It was people working around looking at aircraft. Why were so many aircraft lost in World War II? Looking at the aircraft and came back and seeing the damage that was done to them. And then someone else observed, what we need to do is think about the aircraft that didn't come back, because you could argue if those things can get damaged and get back, they're okay. That's a very simplistic way of looking at it. And we also have members who work in organizational change. So I've got a member who works for Barclays Bank in organizational transformation, and I'm having conversations with professional works in project management, because change programs are all about people. And it's one of our challenges as an organization, because we're very small and niche. I've mentioned healthcare, I've mentioned defense and manufacturing, but we have a lot of members who work in safety critical industries, things like the nuclear sector, a lot of people who work in transport, rail, marine, aviation, but all with that common piece of going, how do you improve things from a human perspective? And there are lots of tools and techniques for how you go about doing that.
Just curious how you see the whole world of health and safety and the various different organizations in that space, because it sounds like from what you're saying, there's a lot of
engagement is one of the pillars of our strategy. And I think, not to be too simplistic, I think we haven't done that as well as we could have done in the past, and we're putting more focus on that. There's a lot of organizations that work in and around health and safety. We're part of an alliance of organizations called the OSH Alliance that brings together IOSH, the Institute of Occupational Safety of Health, and NEBOSH and other organizations. We also engage with HSE, the Health and Safety Executive. Human factors people, I believe, the members I speak to, when they are set up for success, they are integrators. They are bringing different people together. And I use a very simple analogy for that, which is when I drink coffee in a coffee shop, I like small black coffees and I like a bit of hot water on the side. And when you go to a place that has welders, you sometimes get these little ceramic jugs with no handle, with hot water in. Right. And you can't pick them up. So that to me is a good example of design trumping human interface. If your designers do that without your manual handling people, which is, it is your manual handling people will say, no, it needs a nice big handle on it. And it shouldn't be ceramic because that will get too hot. But human factors are almost that people in between that go, okay, how do we balance use and design? Do you want me to go back to the Royal Charter? Yeah, we're 75 years old as an organization. It just so happens it's our 10th birthday at the same time of having a Royal Charter. So we are very young in that. But in the UK, there are a broad number of professions that have something called a Royal Charter. And essentially, a Royal Charter is a document, and you have to go through a process to apply to get a Royal Charter. And it really establishes profession as a distinct profession. In this country, there are things like chartered engineers, chartered surveyors that have been around for over 100 years, I believe. But the idea, it almost protects a profession and recognizes this as a bespoke profession that has a set of skills and competencies in order to practice that profession. And the body that has the Royal Charter is responsible for the definition of what that skill and profession is and the evolution of that skill and profession. So we have a Royal Charter, and what that means is that we own what that chartership looks like, but we also own the process of becoming chartered. So if someone wants to say, I am a chartered human factors professional, then they have to demonstrate that to us, and we have a transparent process that's built out by our members, and all of the chartered bodies have similar things. The next level of that is that there's something in the UK called protected status. So for some chartered bodies, you cannot say you are a professional in that profession unless you are chartered, and that is a legal position. We are not in that camp. So we are unprotected and we're relatively young. We do want to work towards that. But I'll give you one example of a non-legal protection that we have is that in the defense industry, so the Ministry of Defense, for projects with certain size and characteristics, their procurement guidelines say there needs to be a chartered human factors professional on your project team. And that was a really important step for us. And it's something we're looking to pursue in other sectors as well. But I think the golden ticket for professions is when you reach that protected status level.
And does that then also put on your organization a responsibility, not just to make sure people are properly educated and trained and all of that to get the chartered status, but do you also have ongoing, let me use the word, regulatory obligations to make sure that what they're doing stays at a right?
You have to demonstrate that you are continuing to learn and develop in the profession. So you do a logbook to get your chartered status. And then after that, on an annual basis, you have to demonstrate learning, your CPD, doing professional development. And then we have a system in place for checking that people are actually doing learning to a certain standard. So we're not there to regulate the jobs that they do, but they have to demonstrate continuing to learn. And if you don't demonstrate that, you then lose your chartered status.
Let's talk a bit about the strategy reframe process you recently the Institute through. Give us an overview. Who was involved? How long did it take?
Yeah, so that's fairly easy. It started before I started. One of the interview questions when I interviewed for the job was, we have broadly completed our 5-year strategy in 2 years. What do we do now?
Usually it's, well, we've broadly completed our 5-year strategy in 7.
Yeah. So I think there's a number of factors at play. I think one of them was COVID. A lot of the time, membership organizations about engaging, networking, events, a lot of what you did had to change. And I think that in this organization impacted implementation. Key step of developing strategy is reviewing the past strategy. That was my key task. I started in September 22. And we launched in April 24. I think between 18 to 20 months it took. And we purposely took our time. I think the key first step is that learning, insight, engagement. We did a SWOT analysis off of the previous strategy and even did RAG ratings. We basically went through each of the actions and said, have we done it? And how well have we done it? Red, amber, green. I thought that was a really helpful exercise to learn where we're coming from. I also had individual conversations with every single trustee as part of my onboarding, but also with that view to strategy development. The first key step with the trustee group was to create the framework, the boundaries of the exercise that we were doing. What is in and what is out? So, for example, branding and logo. We relaunched our look and feel in 2021. So in the parameters of the strategic review, we said we are not revisiting that. That is a given. But the vision and mission statement, we weren't saying we were definitely going to change them, but they were up for review. And so I think establishing those boundaries, it doesn't matter what those boundaries are, but you need to establish them, get your board or whoever you're accountable to all agree to those boundary conditions. We set up a working group and we purposefully got our president-elect to chair it, because with the recognition of the president-elect, we were hoping to launch the strategy as they went into their presidential year. So that helped get buy-in. We thought it was important in this working group to have some other trustees on it, but not to be fully populated by trustee. It meant that when you took it to the board, that increased the chances of sign-off.
Sure.
And then we tried to get a cross-section of our membership. That was partly looking at sectors, partly demographics, gender, age, different parameters to try and get a good group. And then we did some other insight activities. We did a member survey, and then we did some other data analysis. We looked at our member engagement data, so that sort of quantitative data, and we did some external scanning as well. I wish we could have done more external scanning, but I think that's something we'll do in future. So I think those were the key elements. And then the working group, the ones that really got their teeth into reviewing the outputs of the survey, looking at the things like vision and mission. We went through meetings. We had a collaboration platform where we tested ideas and got written feedback. That worked very well as well. So a number of techniques. As we went through, we produced regular reports to the trustees to say, this is where we've got to, this is what we're doing, what do you think of this? All with a purpose so that when we got to the final, this is the strategy, there were no surprises there. So, for example, with the member survey results, that was a key input. The company we commissioned for that, we did a session where they presented the results to the working group and we discussed it. And then we did a separate session with the trustees. That was a key driver because that helped us go, these are the challenges we've got or the opportunities we've got as an organization. So when the trustees then saw elements of that in the strategic plan, there weren't surprises there.
It sounds like a very thorough, thoughtful approach. Is that how you might describe some other characteristics?
I think thorough, thoughtful, and process. My first member organization, a boss of mine, he really drummed home to me and the whole team that any decision you need to make, there are two parts of it. There's a substance side of it and a process side of it. The substance is obviously the content of a strategic plan in this case, but the process side is, are you demonstrating that you're bringing people along with you through that process and stakeholders? So obviously the trustees are key stakeholders, but do the trustees trust that you are bringing all the other voices to the table?
The strategy, if I understand it, has 4 pillars. You mentioned one before, engagement. I think the other one, through your members learning and professional standards.
Yeah.
But I've got 2 things I'd like to probe around that. One is, are those 4 pillars, they might not have been expressed that way, but would I be able to see them in the previous strategy? So what's changed is not the pillars, but what's in each pillar, or is it not? It didn't look at all like that.
Yeah, it looked different. In the last strategy, we had 4 strategic themes. So creating a world-class organization, supporting our members, so that is the same, the future human, and that's content-led, and I'll come back to that. And then the partner of choice. And you could argue that the partner of choice has morphed into the engagement one. So I'd say 2 of them live through, and a third one is in our foundations. So we have 4 pillars and 3 foundations in our strategy. And I think this is really important, is that the pillars are really the external facing, member facing elements. And then the foundations are the running a good organization elements. Member bodies, I think, sometimes underplay the running the organization elements of a strategy. I was very lucky. I inherited a fantastic team. We're just a small team, but a fantastic, hardworking team who are committed to the organization. I'm really blessed to have them and to continue to work with them. But one of the characteristics I was given was the staff are overworked. And it was true, and they were overworked. And I think one element, and we might come on to this, is that ability to say no to things. Because as we spoke earlier, human factors is so far reaching. We can chase so many different things. But if you hide the running the organization elements of what you do, then it's almost like that iceberg effect, where if it's under the surface, the trustees don't know it exists. And then when you come to those decisions around, do you have capacity to do stuff? You're ignoring a lot of what the organization. So I think that is a key difference, is that we've gone from 4 things to 7 things. That's not more stuff, but that's just more clarity about the things that we do.
You touched on something that I wanted to explore a bit, which is that human factors does take you in so many different directions. And it must be a continuing challenge to retain focus and alignment. How, if at all, do purpose and strategy help with that? Are there examples you could point to of where it's been particularly useful?
We need to have this conversation in 3 years' time to see whether it's been useful. We had last week a 1.5-day session with the staff team around how we put the strategy into action. And we actually had a half-hour session on how to say no. One of my colleagues designed it, did a really good job. She just created a few little scenarios and we had to open them out of an envelope and go, this is the idea. How do you say no to it? Firstly, we've got the strategic framework and we've had a conversation with the trustees to say, this is the work that we are doing and everything we do from now on needs to fit in this strategy. One of the challenges with strategy is that on the one hand, you need to have it broad and flexible enough to grow and evolve. But on the other hand, you need to have it constrained enough that it is easy to say to someone, yes, this fits in our strategy, but more importantly, no, this does not fit in our strategy. So in our engagement pillar, we've done 2 things. Let me start with the ambition. So our ambition statement is to put people at the center of economic, societal, and technological change. Now, an ambition statement really, in my mind, is what are you aiming to achieve? Now, that is a really ambitious ambition statement, but we did that purposefully. But in our strategy brochure, we wrote something that said, while our ambition is broad, we recognize that it cannot be achieved instantly across all sectors and disciplines. Therefore, our strategic roadmap focuses on priority areas where success is most achievable. So what we are saying to ourselves, to our member leaders and our members, is that we know that we can drive change across a broad range of areas, but we are not going to chase them all at the same time. In our engagement pillar, we have a concept of developing what we call theory of change maps for different sectors. Now, I don't know if you've come across theory of change. Yep. It's a really good idea. And I might be wrong, comes from the development world. But the idea is that you have a set of outcomes that you clearly want to achieve, and then you'll build the stepping stones that get you there. And it talks about the inputs, the outputs, and the outcomes, broadly speaking. So we've committed to do that. And I think I mentioned earlier, we had this healthcare workshop right at the start. So the healthcare workshop we have was to develop the theory of change map for the healthcare sector. And I'm really excited about that. So I think to sum it up, there are 2 ways that we're trying to constrain. One is that we're going to come up with a list of priority sectors and disciplines and topics. So we have sectors like healthcare, defense, nuclear, rail, but we also have things like AI or climate change. And there are cross-cutting things, or occupational health that you mentioned earlier. We're going to go, these are our top priorities, middle priorities, and these are ones we're not going to worry about for the moment. And then within each of those, we're going to develop this theory of change map so that with the members who are active in that sector, we can say, look, this is our contribution to driving the profession forward. And in those maps will be the stakeholders that we're going to engage with. Now, I see those as evolutionary documents. I've seen a first draft of our healthcare one. I'm really excited about it. And I'm sure there'll be some gaps in that first one. So as we go through engagement, it will grow and change, but it will have clear things in it that says, this is what we're doing. And I'm hoping that will be a tool to help us not be distracted. The proof is going to be in the pudding of the next 2 to 3 years, but I feel confident.
Ben, in what you said, there's 2 things I just want to pick out and highlight. One is you talked about, here's the top priority, middle priority, these we'll worry about later. It's a framework that I find really helpful. Is what I sometimes call it, me and other people, now, next, later. Because it says, I assume most of those top priorities, you're doing something on it now, or you're getting ready to. It doesn't mean, it's a smaller level of effort. It means not now, but we understand that's next. When we've got time, we're going to get to that. And for me, the real power is going, I get it. It's big. It's important that it's later. It's not in what we're doing now. Just having the discipline to be able to say that, I think is really important, particularly in today's world. The idea that we're going to come up with a 5-year roadmap I think a lot of times it's
Yeah.
not really going to happen now.
I like that now, next, later. And I think I'm going to use those words. We're developing those maps at the moment.
So Ben, I've already stolen your purpose and ambition.
And that's great. We all learn from each other on that. You mentioned the 5 years. So I did want to speak about that as well. We have purposefully not got an end date for our strategy. We purposefully decided to say, this is our strategy for now. It's got flex in it. I think we've put in there that we will review progress against the strategy in 3 years' time. And in some ways, this is a test on my side, because I've been involved in strategy for a few years now. But what I've learned is you can create artificial endpoints. And actually, if you've got goals that have that ability to evolve so that your plan can develop, it almost feels like your strategy will tell you when it's finished. It's about, what is your strategy now? Does it make sense? Yeah. If it still makes sense, keep going and keep evolving the plans. But when it doesn't make sense anymore, then review.
The other thing I want to pick up that you talked about is theory of change, because it does come out of the development world, at least as far as I know. And I do see it a lot in charities and other not strictly for profit businesses. But I think the idea there is really something that for-profit businesses ought to pick up more, because it's a way to deal with complexity and interconnectedness of the world we're living in. That it's not linear, that if you're not clear what steps you take here are going to lead to that, who else needs to come in and when, I think you're setting yourself up not to really have a big impact.
I 100% agree with you. I come across it in my past professional life. And actually, what triggered me to bring it into our strategy was this OSHA alliance that I was in. And it was one of my colleagues in that group that said, well, let's develop a theory of change. But yes, I 100% agree with you. I think we've got a lot to learn. I think one of the key things about it is not only what you're trying to achieve, but who are you engaging on that journey as well? And that stakeholder maps. And I think that is really important.
What advice would you give to other CEOs as they think about purpose and strategy?
So I am a bit of a process junkie, and I passionately believe that good process is the key to success. Having a plan that includes who are the stakeholders in it, how are they being involved in the process, and then reporting through the process. So I think that's a really key one. And one of my learnings is that we put together a sort of communications and engagement plan. And one element of that gave us a lot of great input. So going back to these theory of change maps, we launched the strategy at our last conference. And the closing session of that conference, we did a workshop. So if you go to our website and go to the About Us section, there's a strategy page. And then there's a 2-minute video that introduces our strategy. We showed that video at the front of the session. We then had a presentation of external insights from one of our members who's done a really good paper around the future of the human practice profession. And then we got all the people in the room to break out into sector tables and ask them, what outcome are we trying to drive in your sector? Yeah. So that's one example of it. So yes, I think good process and good communication. I think those are the key things that I would hone in on.
Would you be okay with us putting a link to that 2-minute video in our website?
I'd be honored and privileged if you did. And anyone who is motivated to watch it, I'd love your thoughts on it. So I'm on LinkedIn. If you do Ben Peachey and Ergonomics, you should find me pretty quickly.
The other request is just wondering if there was one or another of these theory of change maps that you'd be willing to make.
So two things. Firstly, Google theory of change. So Amy Ferguson, who's now a doctor, who's done work in healthcare, and she's been a sort of a volunteer in the last couple of years. And it's been really good working with her and others on this. But that's where we started. So Google it, and you can see lots of different examples.
Anything we haven't touched on that you would like listeners to know?
I think the one we didn't really explore much, but the data and insight part, we mentioned our 4 pillars and our 3 foundations. Let me just touch on what those are. So our 3 foundations are operation, digital, and data and insight. Operations run the organization well. We are recently ISO 9001 certified. So that is the core of that goal, but run your operation well. And digital is about the user experience for staff members, for members and other stakeholders. And I think digital is core for everyone. The data and insights one, I think, is really important. So you need really good data and insight to drive your strategy. I'll give you one very simple example of this. One of the tactics that we've put in there is to monitor what human factors jobs are being advertised at any one time and to track that over time. What level of seniority, what department are they in, what salary level are they at? Is that changing over time? We need to grow the relevance of the profession. And we don't know if we're moving the needle if we don't have those data points to understand it. But I passionately believe that data and insight has to be an integral part of every strategic plan.
Be hard for you to disagree with that. And anything you'd like to ask me? And I know I've injected a few of my thoughts already.
Are there any themes that you're picking up from these conversations from either angle? One is, this is a common thing that people are doing and it makes sense, or this is something that I'm not hearing that I think I should be hearing. And you could answer both or either of those.
I guess two thoughts. One, which we've a little bit, at least, brushed past. I've definitely seen a phenomena, both in the conversations on the podcast and elsewhere, that I might describe as purpose grows. That you start off thinking, yeah, this is what we're all about. And it's just so easy to see well, that's connected to this. And maybe we ought to be doing some of that. That means there's a need for real focus. But then also, and I like what you're doing around the theory of change maps and some of the alliances you're part of, is recognizing that some of these big issues, whatever they happen to be, we're not going to get at just one organization pushing its way. We've got to find some way to be broad and focused at the same time. And the other I might point to, and we haven't really discussed at all, is the importance of finding a fit between your purpose and your business model. And by business model, I just mean, what do you deliver to the world that has value? And how does that give you the financial resources to continue doing? Organizations where their purpose doesn't line up with their business model really struggle.
That's really helpful. And I think we're at the very start of that journey. We are trying to drive change in our business model with this new strategy. And I think, and that is the definite challenge we've got at the moment. It's going to take a while to know whether this strategy has been successful or not, because that is a challenge for us.
You did say check back in 3 months' time. I certainly want to do that.
Please do. Can I just mention one other thing? So when I worked in the mining industry body, we were a multi-stakeholder body. We did a sort of stakeholder engagement mapping on the organization. And one of my members at the time encouraged us to use the AA 1000 stakeholder engagement standard from Accountability Organization. And if anyone is going through a stakeholder engagement mapping or planning initiative, I really encourage you to read that standard. It's a really powerful tool. You don't have to follow it exactly, but it's got all the right questions in it around how you identify and I guess prioritize your stakeholders. It's got some really neat stuff in it.
Fantastic. Great suggestion. Thank you. And thank you for joining us. Thank you for your energy and your enthusiasm and your generosity in sharing both your experiences and some of the tools and ideas that you've been.
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's a real privilege to be able to talk about this stuff. So I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Purposeful Strategist. Please email any suggestions or questions to belden@menkes.com. And if you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again, and join us soon for the next episode of The Purposeful Strategist.